One thing that comes in a lot too about prior issues in personal injury cases certainly is your prior health condition. And it's really a slightly different issue here, but that's also the subject of pretrial motions frequently where one side is trying to keep out any reference to unrelated or what they see as unrelated prior medical conditions, and the other side wants to bring it into evidence. So the flip side of the speeding scenario is the person who's suing for injuries who's had 3 prior lawsuits for personal injuries or 3 prior personal injury claims. If I make 3 prior personal injury claims claiming hip injury and leg injury and knee injury and ankle injury, what does that have to do with me now bringing this claim against this defendant for a shoulder injury or a head injury? Why should any of that be introduced other than to try to paint me in front of the jury as somebody who is a serial filer and just abuses the system, when that is such a prejudicial statement and not accurate because I've just one of those people who's had a string of bad luck.
Right. But what does the insurance defense folks do, the defense lawyers, when they're taking or you're taking your doctor's deposition for the low back injury that you rear-ended my client in the parking lot, and my client's had 2 prior back injuries, what we're not going to do is really ask about claims and insurance. We're going to focus on medical treatment. So Dr. X, your patient has had a prior L5, S1 herniated disc and then had surgery for that, and then she had a thoracic injury to her T vertebrae. Would that impact, her health and her condition? Is that those injuries relevant to your treatment and care? And that's going to come into evidence that way.
Yeah.
It may not come into evidence about insurance policies and settlements, but from the health issue.
And prior medical history does matter in those cases if the injury is at all related to it, or it could be seen as this is just a natural progression of a pre-existing condition, right? So especially with something like back or knee injury, right, where you had this issue before, it might have been a sports injury, it might not even have been from a wreck or anything, but just a condition that caused a person to have to go to the doctor, and then 5 years later they get in a wreck and now they're back at the doctor having invasive treatment like surgery. The defense is always going to try to say, well, doctor, isn't this just the natural progression of the pre-existing condition that you saw them for 5 years earlier? And that's fair game, and so we counter that with lifestyle things like, hey, this person went snow skiing every year and was in the gym and just completed a triathlon, and none of that affected her over the course of the last 5 years. What makes you think this pre-existing condition just happened to spring up here, as opposed to the fact that they got rear-ended on this day and ever since have had these problems?